Hi, everybody. I'm Kyle Ellicott, partner at Stacks Ventures, and today we've got a very exciting conversation for you about a topic we've covered a little bit here in the Stacks ecosystem, but more broadly in the blockchain industry, and that is the conversation around sustainability and also a new term that you might not have heard of, ReFi. There tends to be a need for more sustainability and conversation around that in the blockchain industry. But also, we're starting to see a focus shift towards converging of cross-chain collaboration around regenerative finance as well. And today, we're bringing together a few different blockchain communities, including us here at Stacks, and some developers to talk a little bit about how we do move forward when it comes to regenerative finance. And more importantly, how do we make sure that crypto really does, in fact, save the world, or how we can help push those barriers forward as well. With that said, I want to introduce today's panel of guests. First and foremost, we've got Brittany, our executive director at the Stacks Foundation, Kevin, the founder of Super Module XYZ, and Jean of Kernel 0x. Everyone, welcome to the panel. Hi. So before we get started in today's first question, we'd love everyone to do a quick round of introductions. We'll kick off last with Brittany. Jean, why don't you go ahead and kick us off with an introduction on yourself and Kernel 0x?
So I come from 20 years plus in the sustainability realm. I'm also an artist researcher, and I found that Web3 is definitely the space where we can save the world. So I really think that this is the space where we can solve the problems that the sustainability environment was not able to save. So I can go more in details if you want, but I'm really convinced of that. I want to bring my experience there, and especially relating interdisciplinary collaboration, because sustainability or regeneration will not happen if it's only finance or only developer culture. It really has to bring especially art and creation to get true innovation, and more fields such as philosophy and sociology, for example. So how do you work in true interdisciplinary? That's really the issue.
Wow, incredible. And you're right. I mean, this is a collaborative effort, right? Sustainability itself, it doesn't take just one person or one entity or one industry. It takes everybody working together in some way. So excited to dive into things like NFTs and art as well in the second half of our conversation today. Next, Kevin, a quick introduction on yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm Kevin Iwaki. I'm one of the founders of Gitcoin, which has produced 3 different separate sub-entities or new entities in the latest market cycle. Gitcoin DAO, which shepherds Gitcoin grants. Kernel also spun out of Gitcoin, and there's also a hackathon business unit that is spun out of Gitcoin. I am also the author of Green Pill, which is a book. Oh wait, it's being filtered by Zoom, but the subtitle is Green Pilled: How Crypto Could Regenerate the World. I don't think it is yet, but I wanted to articulate that potential in the book, and I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us as well. And I definitely recommend Kevin's book if you haven't had a chance to read it. We are going to talk a little bit about some of the pieces he wrote about as well, but also more broadly of what's happening in the industry today. Last but not least, Brittany, a quick introduction on yourself and the foundation.
I'm Brittany Lachlan from the Stacks Foundation. We are helping bring more utility to Bitcoin by supporting builders, creators, developers, use smart contracts on Bitcoin through Stacks. And we have a mission to sort of allow users to own more of their data, own more of the internet. And I think it goes perfectly in line with thinking about all of the good that this technology can do and how we can support that. We do have programs like grants and free education and a number of things that we know that people have to get educated and start building in order to realize this future. So I'm super stoked about having this conversation today. I'm a big fan of Green Pilled podcast as well, and just thinking about gathering creators who are thinking about the power this technology can have. So thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you again, all of you, for joining. So let's move into the education piece before we get building and really start to green pill all of us here today on the panel and those that are listening. Kevin, with that said, you wrote the book on this subject and potentially what this could bring to the world. To help kind of set the stage for those who may not know what ReFi is, or regenerative finance, could you help explain a little bit of what that term is, how it came to be, and how it relates to the world of crypto and digital assets?
Sure. Well, the first thing I'll say, and thank you for the generous introduction, is that, I feel my work as just creating a Schelling point for these conversations. And the book itself is a mile wide and an inch deep. And that's because it draws from the work of a lot of really great thinkers, philosophers, crypto economics, and software developers. And so, I just want to represent that there's a whole community that's building this. And I'm just kind of like one of the meme lords that's trying to make it approachable. So basically, but to actually answer your question, if I could just share my screen and show a page from the book, let me know if that's not okay. But basically, the way that I've defined regenerative crypto economics is around what type of system are we building with crypto. So basically, an extractive system, the resource available goes down over time. In a sustainable system, the resource availability is not depleted over time, and the system is steady. And in a regenerative system, resources are regenerated and build capacity while also being resistant to shock. So when I hear regenerative finance, I think resource capacity increases over time. And, there's also this sort of implication here that we're building resilient systems. I think that, one of the places where a lot of us got burned in the last market cycle was with the Terra Luna things that were systemically fragile. So how do we build things that are systemically anti-fragile in the space? And that's kind of how I think about regenerative crypto economics. And the other thing that I'll say is, like, we're not just talking about financial capital here. How do we build regenerative systems when it comes to social capital, experiential capital, spiritual capital, intellectual capital, cultural capital, and material capital? So regenerating the world with crypto, to me, means increasing the capacity of each of those types of capital and building more anti-fragile systems. And that's how I've defined it in the Green Pill book. But there may be other definitions out there that are legitimate as well.
Thank you, Kevin. I think that's a good setting of the stage for us today and the conversation we're about to have. And kind of jumping right into today's topic with that last graph you just showed, as this can apply to so many different industries. Let's talk a little bit about crypto's involvement in saving the world, or how it could impact saving the world in different ways, right? We've heard many conversations around things like universal basic income, decentralized identity, decentralized science, or DeSci. So science is a public good. Brittany, you and I have talked a lot about education. We've also talked about carbon credits, cities, communities, workplaces. Jean, I know you mentioned about artists and NFTs. Open question to all three of you is, are we at the point where crypto can or is saving the world? Let's start with you first, Jean. Are we there? Is this something that, as a technology or an industry, is saving the world in some capacity?
I would advocate for if we really want to save the world, we need first to question the centrality of consumer culture today. And I don't see this strong enough. We continue to talk about goods, for example. So one exercise that sometimes I suggest is that, can we think about a world where the word good doesn't exist? Can we just imagine, if we don't have public goods, service goods, no product, nothing, no goods, because we want to value flow if we talk about regeneration. So we live on the base of a culture that is super strong, that have been built the result of the development of the industrialist culture at the beginning of the 20th century. It has been developed purposely. If you look at consumer culture historians, they explain it. We voluntarily decided to create lacks within people, so they buy goods. So all this needs to be questioned. This is why I'm really calling for interdisciplinary collaboration. So we have on Web3 the possibilities and the opportunities to value something else. But for that, we need to question where we stand as well, each of us. And that's what means, engaging subjectivities. So in art, when you talk about engaging subjectivities, and this is where we are going to, which means each individual comes with its own perspective, but to engage in subjectivities, you need to be clear with where you stand for. So there's some kind of, questioning that is getting inner you that helps you connect and discuss and engage and dialogue with others. So that's so different from the way we considered work, for example, based on a Taylorism base where, a work function is only a function. And this is where artists and their methodologies and interdisciplinary, I come from art and science, and I will share some examples that we did with Energy Crypto as well, in terms of interdisciplinary collaboration. And this is where arts and artists can bring something. And actually, it's not only a crazy idea that I have on my side. The European Union has developed some very important funds to promote interdisciplinary collaboration, to promote art and science and art and tech. I heard CEO of global companies calling for the engagement of artists. So that really makes sense.
Absolutely. And what are some of those examples you mentioned in terms of art that you wanted to share?
Yes. So we sent them Rustiska, who is carrying the project Energy Crypto. So Energy Crypto is yc.finance. It's an app that offers to individuals to invest in solar energy, get some revenue share, and also get carbon credit on an NFT is in the form of NFT. So with Energy Crypto, what we started to do is to go both in developing the app, which is still in development, and also investigating artistically. So not only to have a nice, and still there's a nice NFT that is carrying the data of CO2 avoidance, thanks to the solar production, but just to mean, what does it mean today in our culture to have the possibilities for individuals, anybody to invest in solar energy? We are not used to that. It's not how we are thinking about consumer goods. What does it mean? For people, it's not even a typical investment product, and then how can we value and I have no idea if people are interested, for example, to burn a carbon credit. Because if we truly want to be in regeneration, what we want is that not people that make money out of the carbon market, but do burn the carbon credit so they don't allow someone else to pollute. So how do you value this idea of burning a carbon credit, which actually is exactly what consumer and consumption is about? It's about destroying goods. This is a definition, and it's at the opposition of regeneration. How can you value avoiding of polluting, avoiding of using energy? That's not at all the culture we all live in. How do you value, the invisibility of energy? So these kind of things, we have developed it through an art program that we presented along with the app. And actually, I ran the art program, and I presented a project called This is an NFT. And I can describe it, but maybe later on. But that's an example.
Yeah. That's a great example. I think that kind of opens up the pathway for both Brittany and Kevin to share their thoughts as well. I mean, again, Brittany, let's come to you. I mean, is crypto really saving the world? Can it? Where are we in that process? As I mentioned, you and I have talked a number of times around the potential of Web3 and crypto's impact on education, also cities and healthcare as well, even UBI. But what are your thoughts now? I mean, fast forward, here we are in Q4 of 2022. Is this industry really doing what we all hoped it would?
Yeah. Well, I think it's yes and no. I think, thinking about ReFi, it's how do we think about money as a tool to help pursue some of these really large projects or these really ambitious goals, and not as an end goal. So, we've had lots of focus on DeFi and decentralized finance, where the end goal is how much money can you make? But I do love projects that are thinking about, wow, all these yields, all of this collective action coming together can actually do a lot of good for the world. So how do we kind of direct those yields to that? And, I think one of the projects I love, I've seen it grow from the beginning, is a project called City Packs. And it's in the education space. So City Coins is a project built on stacks. The goal was to take stacking yields. So if you hold your stacks, you earn Bitcoin. So City Coins is built on top of that. If you hold your City Coins, you actually earn a yield for yourself and also for your local city. So that idea of having like a collective group that can come together and decide how those funds for the city, which has been in the millions of dollars, gets used is really interesting. But even a step further than that is City Packs was actually an NFT project built on top of Miami Coin. And what the founders realized was that, there's so many kids in the Miami-Dade public school system that were on student lunches. I think it was like over half of the students. So that means that they're at a level of poverty that they qualify for a free lunch. And they realized, how are these students ever going to kind of break out of this cycle? What if we could help educate them about things like Web3 in the classroom, just as a skill set we think is emerging, but also even give them NFTs that earn that yield over time throughout the lifetime of their education, and then would be able to graduate with money at the end, and they could use that towards their future education, getting a better head start into their career or the workforce. So it started with this idea of how about we mint NFTs and all the proceeds go to this mission of making free Web3 education, working with local nonprofits to do that, but also giving these assets to students and letting them benefit from the yield. So I think it's just a really interesting way to think about using these primitives we hear about all the time in DeFi and taking them to bigger ideas. So I would love to see more of that. I think, education is such a powerful tool. There's so much free education, but on the flip side, it's one of the, leading causes of debt for students in America who've pursued continuing education. Those loans are anywhere, from 4% to 8% interest rates. What if you can get a 10% APY on your DeFi over here, and you could help pay off your student loans faster by just thinking about applying these new financial primitives to some of these really hard financial problems that get associated with education. So I think it's a total greenfield, but I am encouraged by projects like City Packs that are already doing this. This already exists. You can mint their different little backpacks, and it's a cute little collectible, but it's less about selling it for yield later. It's more about using it as a symbol of support for this mission.
It's a great point, and we're noticing a theme here. If the audience hasn't picked up, NFTs, non-fungible tokens, have been mentioned a few times. There's a lot of benefits on how what role they're playing around this. But before we could dive a little deeper in that, Kevin, you wrote the book on this, and potentially if this could save the world. And I called out a bunch of different categories. You showed some on from your book as well. Talk to us. Where are we? Is this actually starting to make an impact, or are we so far off and so much still to do?
Yeah, totally. I have a few thoughts. The first one is that I don't really like the framing of save the world. it almost sounds like a little bit hopelessly naive, like Superman saves the world. It's like a child's story, but I do think that we can evolve the world forward in a more regenerative way. And there's lots of little like sub-crises that are happening in the world. So, the book is entitled How Crypto Could Regenerate the World. And I would really like to write the book in 5 years, how crypto is regenerating the world. And I think that we're a little bit off from that. And I'll just illustrate that by sharing my screen again and showing a meme that I really love when I talk about this. And I don't know if the audience can see it, but it's basically someone talking to a bunch of his audience, and he says, "I give you the tools to end climate change, poverty, and corruption." And his audience is like, "Well, when Moon, when token," which I think illustrates the maybe cultural differences that are in Web3 when it comes to this technology. And so I have both a cynic inside of me and also a cautious optimist inside of me. And so I understand both of these cultures. And, I think that when we talk about Web3, it's kind of like I'm reminded of the parable of the blind man and the elephant. This is like ancient parable in which you have a bunch of blind men that are feeling an elephant, and the first one feels the tusk and says, "Oh, this is a spear." And then one of them feels the leg and it's like, "This is a tree trunk." And then the last one feels a rope or the tail and says, "Oh, this is a rope." And the point is that neither of them are grasping the whole elephant. And I think that the whole elephant of Web3 is that we now have programmable money, and we can program our values into our money. And so if we value saving the world or regenerating the world, then we can do that. If we value art, then we can fund that. If we value profit maximalization, then when Moon, when token. And so Web3 is a mirror that we look into it, and it projects back what we want to do. And so when it comes to regenerating the world, I believe that there's a possibility, but we have to. There's change of self and there's change of system, and crypto is a tool and a system that we can use in order to evolve things forward. And one of the things that I'm really, really excited about when it comes to crypto helping to solve some of the hard governance problems and coordination problems in the world is this idea that my friend and someone I've been collaborating with has talked about. Daniel Schmachtenberger is this existential systems thinker that I have been doing some Green Pill podcasts with. By the way, there's a podcast that goes along with the book. You can get it at greenpill.party. We're about 55 episodes into detailing how projects are actually doing this, regenerating the world with Web3. Anyway, Daniel comes on the podcast and we talk about this thing called the meta crisis, which is basically you've got coordination failures. You've got things like climate change. You've got things like the inability to fund journalism. And those are all coordination failures, things that we would never choose to happen, but for lack of a better coordination mechanism, they happen. And that's one way that these human complex systems can evolve. Another way that they can evolve is like, oh, we have a coordination failure. Let's just put like the government in charge or put this one actor in charge of solving it. And that can solve the coordination failure, but it also gives you a secondary consideration of you embed authoritarian power into the person who's designing to solve the coordination failure. So you've got these two attractors in human systems, one towards coordination failure, which is sort of disorganization, and another is towards organization but centralization and authoritarianism. How could we create a third attractor towards something that solves coordination failures but is decentralized? And I think that that's the huge potential of Web3 technology, is the ability to solve coordination failures, but in a decentralized, uncorruptible way. And that's where I think that this technology can really do some good stuff for the world. But that's me trying to grasp the whole elephant. If you only grasp the tail, then you might just think that it's all monkey JPEGs and pump and dumps.
Yeah. Well, I think to like your point is like, it's hard, or I find that it's hard right now for people to have a vision of what this future looks like. There was this great talk about like, we need a creative director for Mars. And there's like sort of this like, we all probably have an image of like what living on Mars or going to Mars looks like. And just having that as like a collective vision that people can have inspires people to even think about like, what does the future look like? What does culture look like when this happens? Maybe they don't want to go to Mars. Maybe they've already thought about, I would choose to go or I wouldn't choose to go. Like all of these things that aren't even feasible today, people have in their collective mindset with these sort of like very visual images that exist. And I think it's hard with like Web3, it's hard to see what that looks like. I do think that there's an overwhelming sense of like, I don't know, sort of flaunting value or flaunting ownership over certain things. And it probably causes a lot of people to like back away from Web3 and say, this isn't for me. This isn't the vision that I want to spend my time and my efforts sort of building towards. And I think, you know, in your book, 5 years from now, I really hope like there's the visuals of like, you know, when this world exists, what does it look like? How does it feel? What are some of the most aspirational things that we can imagine that comes from it? And we feel like, wow, we're finally in harmony with that vision, not just sort of these individual projects. So that's something I'm on. So if anyone's listening and you're kind of thinking about this, or, you know, the artists who are really imagining, you know, these futurescapes, I think like that could be a really awesome mission to try and paint for more people, to get them involved and know that these pieces are being created and collective action can really impact everyone, and not just benefit like a small group of people. So that's my call to action, maybe.
Yeah, there's a very interesting quotation from Ursula Le Guin, you know, the science fiction writer. She says that what imaginative art and storytelling give us is the ability to imagine alternative endings as attainable. So that this training on imagination is so important. And this is so much what we didn't learn, you know, like we have learned not to imagine. It sounds not serious, but actually the more serious thing.
Well, and to all of your points, I mean, this is not just a new product or a new service or just a new wave of technology. This is a complete rethinking of everything, to Jean, your point, we've ever been taught, right? We're using common terms right now around, you know, reimagination or reimagining the world, you know, changing of our entire way of thinking and knowledge and history to a future that we all hope and want to see through this industry and the multiple technologies that live within. This is a big change, right? This isn't like the mobile revolution that we had where mobile phones all of a sudden started to connect us, or social started to connect us further and drove, you know, things like e-commerce. This is completely shifting paradigms upside down and rethinking them in so many different ways than we could have ever imagined. And each of you are driving this in respective roles, and all of those listening are as well. This is wild. And also, we have a lot of missing pieces. Kevin mentioned a few, and Brittany and Jean, I would love to hear your thoughts on what's missing. Because this seismic shift, this is not something that's going to happen overnight. Kevin's book, in 5 years, we're all going to read Green Pill Part 2. And exactly to Brittany's point, we're going to look back and say, wow, a lot has happened in 5 years. But together, collaboratively, we need to work to push that beyond 5 years and really see some of these things happen. So maybe to both of you, what's missing still outside of our imagination and way of thinking?
From my perspective as a European, you know, I still don't understand, you know, I'm still not 100% sure of how decentralization is a good thing. Like, you know, we have been always, you know, given away part of our sovereignty in exchange of protection. And I really wonder, and if it's not going to be a fully individualistic system, and where the protection is laying. So I started to think about what would be a peer-to-peer care system. And I was wondering, you know, I think we should more think in the same way, that in the same time that we're thinking about decentralization, thinking about care. And the question of care is something that we think differently in Europe than in the US, for example. And that's also something I'm calling for in the Web3 environment, is that only European American perspectives, you know, and there's more perspective than this one, of course, these two ones, but only for that are two, you know, close continents in terms of cultural, you know, we think we are part of the same culture. We have so strong differences. and especially, for example, in our experience of what a public good is, a common good is, you know. Working more on the idea of care, and it's super interesting because, again, in the art and research field, there's very interesting work on this topic that can be used outside the artistic field. Very interesting, because artists know what precarity is, you know. Okay, so.
Yeah, well, I think like sort of like building on that, you know, you're talking about like care or like protection. It, you know, made me think of sort of like we've built all these trustless systems, and people think like, well, decentralized, everything, you know, can be built without trust. I think we've seen kind of like a reaggregation of trust in things like DAOs. So I do think it's like we want ease to go in and out of different groups. We want ease to be able to change leadership if it doesn't feel like it's serving us. But I think that these like trusted systems actually are still very important. You know, how do we lower the barrier for reputation so people can contribute even if they haven't already built like a long track record? I know that there's a lot of that work happening in the Gitcoin community. But I just think like, how do we create those trusted spaces? And on the internet now, we use centralized services to help keep spammers away, to try and, you know, keep people from being scammed or taken advantage of, or fake accounts, all that stuff. And so I think that piece is so critical to more people getting involved, is just trying to eliminate a lot of the hurdles and challenges that put any user at risk if they're putting their time, their effort into something, or they're putting their money into something, whether that's for personal gain or for these really big missions. I do think we have to help people be safe and be able to like abstract away all of these kind of threats that are in their way. So I do think that's like a very critical piece. I also think that, you know, just having sort of like more grand visions of what can happen. Like I think the Constitution DAO, when people collectively got excited about potentially buying a copy of the Constitution, that was like a game changer, I think, in people's thinking of like, wow, we can do big things. We can come together and make something really hard. Like we can compete with like the really wealthy of the world and do this. And so I think, you know, it's like, how do we crowdfund the next like nuclear power plant or clean energy source? Because it's something people deeply care about. It's very hard to do as an individual, but like as a collective, not only with contributing money, but also contributing like the necessary resources and expertise in order to try and get that to happen. So I love those sort of like very moonshot ideas that help people get together. Even though the Constitution DAO wasn't successful, I think it's been pointed to as why, what the power can be when people opt into ideas they care about.
Absolutely. And success is defined in many ways, right? I mean, successfully, it brought a ton of people together to purchase something that otherwise might not have been able to. And your example, for instance, of coming together to, you know, fund the next nuclear power plant, for instance, that's something else we could see potentially in the future as well. And one of the things I think, again, we're seeing commonality is also structure. You know, how are these things going to be put into place from a technical perspective, but also just in general? And again, Kevin, I'm coming to you on this one. You put out a massive tweet thread yesterday around how public good funding hyperstructures could be designed. And you went through a few bullet points of ideas, and we'd just love to hear your thoughts from a technical perspective of how could we design structures for public good funding to take advantage of some of the things that we've discussed today.
Yeah, totally. Really, really fun question to take a swing at. So first, what is a hyperstructure? I kind of think of a hyperstructure as just sort of an institution in the cloud, or I believe that atoms, institutions, and blockchains all provide to the world hardness. So with atoms, you get a certain guarantee of physical hardness, especially with precious metals, that they're hard to move. With institutions, you have an assurance as a member of that society that that institution will be around and will be there for you. You know, think of like Social Security or national defense or other institutions in our society that provide assurances to society that it can act in a certain way. And blockchains also provide a certain amount of assurance that things will be a certain way. Bitcoin, the most famous one is Bitcoin's 21 million meme. There will never be more than $21 million Bitcoin, or 21 million Bitcoin. I can almost hear like Michael Saylor in my head when I hear that. And that, the hardness that comes out of these institutions is one of their primary features that we haven't had in Web 2 before. And so, the question that comes to mind for me is, well, how do we build new information age institutions that support the public good now that we have the property of hardness that comes from blockchains? So basically, I just think of like a hyperstructure as an institution in the ether, in the cloud, and it has this property of hardness that'll be there for you. Jacob Horn, who's the person who coined the phrase hyperstructure, adds a couple more criteria. They say it's a piece of code that will run free forever without intermediaries and is simultaneously really valuable to own. So basically, to break that down, free forever means that you can use it. You can use it without paying. You can derive public good for it without paying. Without intermediaries means that there's no one to camp on it and extract from you. We're not building a Web 2 style Facebook where it's spying on you and delivering money back to shareholders. And then is valuable to own is I think an important component, because it allows you to use private capital to build towards the public good. If an investor could see a return by building a hyperstructure, we're going to get a much more diverse, pluralistic set of market-based hyperstructures than we would get if there wasn't that capital available to it. So that's what a hyperstructure is. And I'm really obsessed with this idea of how could we build a public goods funding hyperstructure, which is how do we build institutions that support the public goods. And, I think that a couple criteria for what that looks like is that it can support local public goods or global public goods. So anything from like fixing a pothole in front of my house or regenerating my local community, all the way up to global existential things like climate change and the loss of biodiversity and things of those nature, can be forked. And that just to me means the right to exit, in that it can't be captured. So if it does become extractive or off base in some way, then it can be forked. Modularity, I think, is a key property, because it means that I really like the Unix philosophy of designing software systems that do one thing and do them well, and then you can like daisy chain those modules together. And so on top of modularity, there's this idea of super modularity, when you have a group of modules that are greater than the sum of their parts. So basically, what is the opportunity to build a lot of these like little small modules and then compose the modules or money Legos into something bigger over time. And like, this is one of the reasons, by the way, that I'm like almost sure that Web3 is inevitable, is because me as a software developer can walk into a hackathon and build something with off the shelf open source code in a weekend that it would have taken a bank like 10 years and $100 million to do, which is just like, it's cool. That's like it's just amazing. We're standing on the shoulders of giants and have all these modules. Anti-fragile mechanism design. I don't think any of us want to build the next Terra Luna, which is just going to like implode in a cloud of dust within 48 hours. Credible neutrality via decentralization, I think, is important for a hyperstructure. Financial support and sustainability. I'm just like rattling off criteria here, but the whole point is to, in the listener's mind, evoke what would a 20th century institution look like if you designed it around 21st century norms, information age things, like the opposite of going to the DMV and waiting for 2 hours to be heard so that you can get a license. Feels more like being on the internet, and that your time is being respected and your input is being respected, and hopefully creates a more high resolution democracy because of it. And so, I'll just end by saying this. Like, listen, I founded Gitcoin. We've delivered $70 million worth of funding for public goods in using Web3. We're on a journey to prove that it's possible at Gitcoin. And part of this is like a Gitcoin subtweet is like, how else should we be designing Gitcoin? Like, these are the lessons that we've learned along the way of building a public goods funding hyperstructure. But what are the generalizable principles? And hopefully that allows others in the ecosystem to create other hyperstructures that also support the public good. And the end result would be be this meta hyperstructure, which is all of the different hyperstructures being interoperable with each other, and Web3 having a set of institutions that can regenerate the world from there. So I know that there's a lot there, but I'm just really excited about this design space, and I think there's a lot of possibility if we choose to build this meta hyperstructure that supports the public good.
If no one else is excited off Kevin's energy, I am. I mean, Kevin, you just went in such technical depth with such excitement through that whole point. I think that's great inspiration for any of those that are listening. And also, Brittany, I want to come to you around a similar point in something that Kevin had mentioned around his efforts and the teams at Gitcoin is how are foundations thinking about ReFi and impact investing? There was just a announcement made from the Cello Foundation. They're doing 2% for Web3 impact, a pledge. So they're looking to bring about $20 billion by 2025 to invest into Web3. But you're a part of the Stacks Foundation. You're the ED, executive director. How are you seeing this not only unfold in our ecosystem, but broader from the foundation's perspective?
Yeah. Well, we're one foundation, but there's many like us. There's so many. We actually got together a number of Web3 Foundation leaders who are all thinking about this question. And we had some great attendees from Supermodular and Gitcoin sort of sharing their wisdom as they've been I think like the longest running grants programs. At Stacks Foundation, we think about grants as a way to support builders, support infrastructure. There's a lot of pieces that are non-commercializable. So an entrepreneur may not ever make any money by helping contribute some pieces of code or building pieces of these structures that are necessary to make all of this, make these visions real. And I think grants programs can be a really great way to fund these kind of like small pieces of public goods. Maybe it doesn't look like you're funding the next, education system, but by providing those technical infrastructures or the technical tooling to enable other people to build those ideas is really critical and really important. So we've spent millions in grants to fund people who are coming to do this work and build that work. But I don't think it stops just with, funding grants and funding the infrastructure. We've also thought about how do we help pursue our mission by supporting other causes that believe this as well. So we have stacking rewards. We stack our tokens, we earn Bitcoin. We take some of those yields and we've used them to fund core development of Bitcoin. We see that as a really important structure in this future. It's the most globally accepted cryptocurrency. It's the most accessible to the most people in the world. A lot of people hold it. Developing nations use it as some of their core currency to hedge against, large volatility. So we think Bitcoin is very critical. And so we've actually helped fund development of that. So we think about, doing public good, but it may look at the protocol level and you may not be seeing it at the greater world. But we do love anything that is sort of supporting more direct ties to some of this vision, the educations, the, clean energy, the giving back to people who are less fortunate. So we have also funded something called Stacking for Causes. It's a platform where folks can take a portion of their stacking yields and put it towards, nonprofit causes that they care about. So that's kind of a bridge between Web3 and I don't know, not even the internet, but basically local charities and causes that are pursuing those missions. They're doing the work on the ground. But I do think it fits in that ReFi category of like, how do you think of like Web3 yields and financial systems and structures as a way to support things that you care about? So we've done that. And I think across the board, there are other foundations thinking about this same thing. How do we collaborate to make it even easier? Gitcoin, I think, has really paved the way for quadratic funding. And what that is helping add more funding to causes people care about and identifying those by people putting money against the ones that they care about. So it's not just like who's the richest that those projects will get the most attention, but instead the most people who care about it can come together. And like, we would love to implement more of that into even the way that we give out grants. How can we amplify the amount of money that we give by having other community members contribute, other folks amplify maybe projects that don't have as much attention, but they, a lot of people care about them. So we can kind of amplify that and make sure the funds get to the right people. So, I think it's a great space to learn. And I think collectively as like a Web3 community, we could do much better if we leverage, we stand on the shoulders of those who've already done it, and hopefully make the systems just even easier. So people don't even care what chain it is. They're just like, this is something I care about. I'm going to go here and contribute my time, my talent, my funds to make a difference here.
I love it. And selfishly, I got to ask, Brittany, we've got the upgrade of 2.1 stacks coming out here shortly, and more upgrades to follow after that. How will that upgrade and the technology within the Stacks ecosystem play a role in some of the examples that we've mentioned today around regenerative finance? If you can kind of touch on that for just a moment.
Yeah. So, well, for those who are, sort of newer to Stacks, as we are bringing more utility to Bitcoin, and we think that there's so much potential in Bitcoin because of its, global nature, its security. It's different than Ethereum. And I think that's like a really great thing because we have these great experiments out there and they have different value props. But with Stacks 2.1, this upgrade is coming in the next few months. It makes it much easier to bridge to different ecosystems. We live in this multi-chain world. How can we make it very easy to move between these? Kind of as Kevin touched on earlier, it's like, the seamless experience where you can kind of move between these different places and you're not kind of stopped with roadblocks. I think that's like a huge unlock. It also adds speed. It offers, new primitives that different developers can use to build with whatever their ideas may be, even using more like DeFi on Bitcoin. So all of that locked value that's currently just sitting there, like the digital gold, how do you take that and actually put it to work on some of these ideas and some of these missions? So we're very excited about seeing how, builders, how developers take that and use it. So I highly encourage you to check out stacks.org. If you have an idea, apply for a grant, get all the latest updates on 2.1. But I do think that these ideas we're talking about today are even more possible, or even more feasible with this upgrade. So I really hope folks take a look.
Thank you. As I said, it was a selfish question. I'm looking to build something. I know a ton of others out there are looking to build as well. So thank you, Brittany. And kind of a last question for everybody. We've had this common theme of rethinking and paradigm shifts. We talked a lot about NFTs and again the future of the web as well. All imagination on the table. We're going Walt Disney here. Where can this industry go? And for each of you, I would love to hear, what is one thing you'd love to see solved in the next 5 years that gets included in Kevin's part 2 book that can contribute to regenerative finance as well? So Jean, we're going to start with you. One thing you'd like to see solved for the future with regenerative finance, all imagination on the table.
I will give the example of the project I carry within the Omega working group of Token Engineering Commons, which is also a GitCon grant. Thank you, GitCon. And which is actually interdisciplinary DeSci-inspired art and science lab inspired by biology theory. So basically, we are thinking of an economic system inspired by metabolism system. So the token engineering research is really embedding biology and its biomimicry, into the economy. So we do have concrete project today because I really think that it's really important to do change things at the present. This is where the political action stands. And not only think to the future. So we have this, I really hope that in the future, we do have an economy that is inspired by biomimicry and can value a system, an economic system that is creating value flow. And in the present, we have a project that is about to be launched called Dance Unchained, which is exploring digital identities in interdisciplinary collaboration with dancers. So that's my wish for the present and the future.
Very cool. All right, Brittany, same question. Imagination all on the table. What do you want to see?
Well, I have like the crazy, we're funding, green energy with millions of people, and, we can kind of see those things come to light. We're basically all Twitter complaining just turns into like action. But, maybe in the more feasible realm, I think it is thinking about like those next 10 million that come into crypto or Web3, coming in with the mindset of like, this is a place to make a difference. This is a place to bring my values and convert it into things I care about. Not just like, oh, I'm here to like profit and leave, or like how much value can I extract from the system, but instead like how much can I contribute, or how can I use this as a tool? So like my goal is like, how can we educate people more on all of these opportunities and like really make a difference? And I do think like part of that, sort of a side project I've been working on is just thinking about like the regulatory around this, because I do think, especially in the US, it creates a really large hurdle. If people don't have access to this new technology system that, it does include a financial system, I think that's going to be a huge blocker to innovation and allowing some of these ideas to flourish. So I do think it is on all of us to try and think about how we can educate even regulators and make sure that we don't end up in a space where there's very little innovation because of restrictions or bad actors or scams have kind of taken all of the energy out of what's possible with this. So that's a great place to just thinking about how you can contribute in the short term, whether it's voting, whether it's, advocating with your representatives around regulation, or even just educating people who are new of what's possible, what the challenges are, and what the reality is of how this can be used for good, not just, some of the headlines about scams and stuff.
Love it. Kevin, same question. Imagination all on the table, something that's not in the book as well. What do you want to see?
Yeah. Well, like I said, in 5 years, I'd like to write the book, How Crypto is Regenerating the World. Right now, the subtitle is How Crypto Could Regenerate the World. And, my approach to engineering that world is kind of T-shaped. So T-shaped meaning that like we're going deep in the work that's happening at Gitcoin, and going broad in building a broad coalition of people who are working on it. So Gitcoin runs a conference called Shelling Point. A Shelling Point is just in game theory a place where people will gather without any need for communication. So, an example I use of Shelling Point is in a campfire. At night, if I'm out camping, everyone will naturally go around the campfire without having to communicate. It's a Shelling Point for people at night. That's my Colorado example of a Shelling Point. A New York example is Grand Central Station. People will meet at the clock tower at Grand Central Station. So we run an event called Shelling Point, which is literally a Shelling Point for the regen movement to come and to talk about what they're doing to regenerate the world, to help the talent and capital find the impact DAOs, and for the impact DAOs to find each other. You need a Shelling Point, a place where people can gather. And so a lot of the work that the Gitcoin DAO does around Shelling Point is about building a regen movement. Gitcoin Grants is about helping that capital and talent find the impact DAOs and providing a launch pad for impact DAOs. The Green Pill book was kind of a Shelling Point for regens to come together. There is 2,000 people in a Telegram channel that are all exchanging ideas about how impact DAOs could work. And now we have the Green Pill podcast, which we've done 55 episodes of various projects that are actually doing it. So really proud to be just creating a channel for greater combinations of strength and intelligence to come together through our work at Gitcoin, at Shelling Point, and with the Green Pill podcast, and just trying to stoke that movement forward. So T-shaped answer, that's the broad base of what we're doing. The deep work work is at Gitcoin. So basically, Gitcoin's funded $70 million worth of digital public goods and open source software. You can see the stats at gitcoin.co/results. And we're going deep on two big problem areas. The first is quadratic funding. It's a way to democratically allocate capital within your community. It's a new flavor of crowdfunding, and that's where most of the $70 million of Gitcoin results have come from. And there's this dependency in quadratic funding called Sybil resistance, which is basically how do you identify the humans from the bots? How do you identify the unique humans in the system? And Gitcoin just released this thing called Gitcoin Passport, which basically allows you to show your Sybil resistance to Gitcoin. And one of the things that we really want to do with Gitcoin Passport is create a movement from one token, one vote DAOs to more one human, one vote DAOs. So basically, why is this important? Well, we want to build more democracy into our economic systems, and we basically want to enable systems that are going to be available to the masses of humanity whose financial lives are not just their bank accounts and their investments, but are their local communities and their jobs. People who don't have a lot of savings. If we want them to have utility in Web3, then we have to provide a set of use cases that are more democratic and favor everyday people instead of just rich people. So the work at Gitcoin TLDR is Gitcoin Passport, which is about Sybil resistance, and Gitcoin Grants 2, which is going to be quadratic funding for any EVM-based community. So basically, hopefully taking what's worked really well in the Ethereum community around Gitcoin Grants and allowing any community to have quadratic funding right out of the box. And that's kind of where we're going in order to stimulate this world. And, like I said, I hope to write this book in 5 years called How Crypto Could Regenerate the World. But an even better scenario than me writing it would be if other people would write it in 5 years, like people fork the book and write their own. So removal of myself as an intermediary to the movement, I think, will be a part of the success as well. But those are some thoughts about where we'd like to see it go.
All right, I love it. I think that's a great way to end today's conversation, and hopefully generated for each and every one of you listening some ideas, thoughts, and also provided some education around how, again, crypto could save the world, and also how regenerative finance or ReFi may play a role in that as well. So take some of these ideas, some of this education. Would love to see what each of you are building out there. So do reach out to each of us. We'd love to hear. And as we come to close, I want to make sure everyone gets a quick shout out. Kevin, part 1 of the book, before the 5-year version in the future, where can everyone go to get the book and also learn a little bit more about some of your writings and Gitcoin as well?
Sure. Yeah, you can go to greenpill.party, which has links to purchase the book and to subscribe to the podcast. So don't forget to like and subscribe.
Great call out. All right, Jean, where can everyone go to learn a little bit more about you and also the recent Gitcoin grant that you just received and some of the projects you're working on?
Yes, maybe you can go on janblock.com, or you can go on Token Engineering Discord server on Omega Working Group, and there's a dynamic energy budget. So it's a dynamic energy budget thread that you can join. I'd love to get feedback, more people engaging in this project. I just wanted also to take advantage and just mention this amazing project from another guy from Omega Working Group called expressions.peace.org, which is a very, very ambitious project that, is evolved thanks to Web3 that I think is going to grow and develop. So just check this one as well. Thank you.
Thank you as well. Thank you for the last call out there. And last but not least, Brittany, where can everyone go learn more about the foundation, Stacks Foundation, just to be specific, but also the grants program and getting started building on and around Stacks?
Yeah, so stacks.org is the home base for the Stacks Foundation. You can learn more about grants. We do offer free grants, free education if you want to learn Clarity, if you want to program in smart contracts, and also just get involved with the community. We have links to our Discord, our Telegram, our Twitter, wherever you're most comfortable. We'd love to see you join there and be part of our community. So thanks.
Wonderful. Brittany, Kevin, Jean, thank you very much. To each and every one of you listening, thank you again. Hope today's conversation provided a little bit of education around regenerative finance and how crypto could save the world in the future, and also gave you some ideas to build, develop, and contribute to the industry as a whole. I'm your host today, Kyle Ellicott, partner at Stacks Ventures. Until next time, everyone, have a wonderful day. We'll talk soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
You